And I would even take it a step further. You want some more infrastructure? House File 2122, take a peek at that. That is the initial bonds for the Botno Transitway, which we've spent a lot of time talking about. And it's filled with local legislators around here. Lyndon Carlson, who first introduced the bill in 1824. And, I'm sorry, not 1824, something like that. Sandy Peterson, Mike Nelson, Deb Hillstrom, the whole gang from this area is already setting the bonds in motion for that. I mean, here we are, already in debt on all these bonding bills. Governor Dayton's bonding bill, just to bring it back to that, for this year includes $25 million for the Southwest Corridor Light Rail, which is still in the planning phase, but that's not a thing we need, and here we're putting that on the credit card. I want to jump to some education reform, too. Everybody's going to love all these things. Recently, the governor signed, on February 20th, signed a bill that, it's House File 1770, that requires teachers to pass a basic skills test. I didn't know we didn't have a basic skills test. Did you know that?
I did not.
So a teacher with a master's degree did not have to pass a basic skills test? And believe it or not, actually 9 people in the Minnesota House voted against this. I don't have a list of who, but and one person that passed the Senate, there was one dissenting vote in the Senate to get somebody to pass a basic skills test. I'll tell you, you want to talk about creating mandates, listen to this one. House File 2054, sponsored by Phyllis Kahn of Minneapolis. Sandy Peterson's also signed on to this. Makes a second language a requirement for graduation. With all the kids who can't read and write in English, I mean, is that not another mandate, another thing that they have to add to the curriculum? I mean, what in the world?
It's a nice to have.
Well,
I mean, we want the best education system that money can buy.
It's not unimportant, but with all the kids, I mean, on the one hand, they talk about the achievement gap.
Yeah.
And how kids aren't learning the basic things. On the other hand, they're adding to what they have to learn.
Well, and that's the thing. In elementary school, where they're taking away math and social studies and music and these other important things just to focus on math and reading, and still they can't read when they... Yeah. I was sitting down talking to a teacher last week who shall remain nameless, but no, she was just distraught. I mean, she's had to lower the bar so far just because nobody would turn things in, and she couldn't sit and give no credits to everybody. The school wouldn't allow that. So it's like, well, you read 2 books and take a test, and you can pass anyways without handing any homework in or doing any tests. And then you want to hand homework in, great. If it's late, no big deal. Just make sure you get it in. And this is where we've come to, because so many kids don't care. It's not an achievement gap in that there's one group that is able to do better than another.
It's also a parenting gap.
There's a parenting gap, and some of that is discipline, and some of that is, positive support as well.
Well, and some of that is also taking the power away from the classroom, taking the power away from the teachers. I think the union has played a role in that as well, because they focus on pay and benefits, and that's all they seem to kin, who you can and can't. I mean, they want local control, yet they want the legislature to put in place seniority rights and all that kind of stuff, and those goals also contradict each other.
Well, I know you were saying earlier when we were talking that the union actually says they want your child from cradle till graduation.
Yep. Birth, they want to control you from birth. That is in their legislative platform. And this whole early childhood movement, I mean, there have been bills, and this has happened before. There's another one, House File 891, which is going to create a separate levy for early childhood. They're going to force you to go to early childhood. And I mean, that all sounds great. We'll get them while they're young. But I never went to early childhood. I mean, it was, my mom was home with me, and she went back to work later.
Yeah.
But I don't agree that going into early childhood at 1 year old is the best for every kid.
No, I don't think so either. I mean, there are some social elements which probably are helpful for you to learn to get along with kids or whatever, but you can learn that with your neighbors. People used to stay home, and it's not to say that women's place is in the home. That's not what I'm saying, because there's stay-at-home dads that do quite a good job as well. And I think it's important that the child is able to have a childhood, and that a parent is there to mold and shape that child early in life, because that's where you get your values. Do you want to get your values from the teachers union, or do you want to get your values from your parents? Do you want to get your values from your church, or do you want some minimum wage,
And pretty soon they'll have, in early childhood, anti-bullying legislation in early childhood as well, I'm sure. That'll be coming soon. But, the other thing, too, is something has to be done about the social engineering in schools. I have a friend who has a kid who will remain nameless. But this child was very advanced in, I won't say the school district either, was way ahead of their grade in math class, was not in the other grades. And the kid was getting an A, and their parents couldn't figure out, but yet the teacher kept saying, he's screwing off and blah, blah, blah. It turned out he was getting all of his work done, and then he got bored and started screwing around. So my friend and her husband went to the teacher and said, well, why isn't he in, how we had the high class, the middle class, and what we used to call the bonehead class when I went to school. That's what we used to call it. And they said, well, we don't do that here. And she said, you're kidding. He said, no. And you know what the reason was? The classrooms were not, what did they say? They were not racially diverse enough. It was not racially diverse enough to have the advanced class, the middle class, and the bonehead class.
I'm sorry, but no matter what ethnic background you have, I think that you would want your child to be in the appropriate group, that they got either the help they need or they were allowed to go and learn ahead. I mean,
but it's like the whole thing is, are we trying to smush everyone down to the same level? Are we trying to pull back the achievers while we try to pull up? I mean, that's the wrong way to do it. The achievers, we want them to keep going, and we also want the lower learners to be back up to grade level.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry to say it, but the achievers are the ones who will someday run your companies, cure cancer, design a flying car. You want your achievers to be able to maximize their potential. You need innovators. You cannot have a society that's going to function that does not have innovators.
Yeah, and it's like what was said in high school, be nice to all the nerds and the geeks. 20 years from now, they'll be the ones with all the money. But, just to throw out, House File 1870 is another bill to watch, because that basically eliminates tenure-based layoffs. That, in fact, that passed the House, a very partisan vote, 68 to 61. I see it headed toward a conference committee. But again, that's another thing. Do we want quality teachers, or do we want teachers who've only taught for 3 years? I mean, if you want local control, our school boards have to be free to hire and pick the best people.
Yes.
So, why protect somebody's job who is not doing the job up to the standards you set? And I throw a few other things out there. House File 858 will be another one to watch. That requires board elections and referendums to be in even years, so they can't sneak things through in an odd year where nobody's paying attention. But those are the kinds of things to watch for in the session. And there's a whole bunch of other things, but these are, we just want to touch on the big things and how they might affect us here locally and your schools here, whether it's Robbinsdale, Osseo, Hopkins, whoever, all can be affected by this legislative stuff that we've been talking about.
Yep. And, it's hard to follow these. I mean, there's, at best, it's kind of mediocre. The way that you have to look these bills up, you almost have to know the number of the bill, and it's important though, because they do affect us here locally, and there's a number of them that aren't just statewide edicts. They affect us locally in the amount of money that we get and what we're able to do with that money, and it's just so important to have it stay local.
Yeah, and I should mention, you talked about how it's not easy to find these bills. So far in this session, over 2,500 bills have been proposed. Now, of course, the session is 2 years. Keep that in mind. But I mean, the biennium, 2,500 bills. Now you can look them up, by the way, by keyword if you do know, like the chief author, for example. You know, and there are 201 legislators, so there's, you know, it's not that much, but that is something to keep in mind. Keep watching. We'll have another update as this comes, but we are running out of time rapidly. Did that 30 minutes fly by, or did it fly by?
It always does.
It always does. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, folks, and continue to pay attention. We'll continue to bring you stuff as we see it, and we'll see you next week. We are out of here.